A Department of Justice civil rights attorney is headed to Burlington, Iowa, right now to assist in the prosecution of a murdered gender-fluid teen. Kadari Johnson was shot to death in March of 2016. The 16-year-old, who also went by Candace, did not specifically identify as transgender, but sometimes dressed in women's clothing. Her family says her murder is a hate crime. Alex Miller joins us now. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he's rolled back many protections for trans people in the U.S. Since assuming his position at the DOJ, and yet he is sending one of his top lawyers there to help in this case.
Yeah, it's all part of the Matthew Shepard Hate Crimes Act, which was passed under the Obama administration, basically saying that the federal government can get involved in some of these hate crimes investigations. So it looks like Christopher Paris is going to be heading to Iowa, and he's going to serve as the actual county prosecutor in this case. And the Sessions DOJ says this is all part of them protecting all Americans. Now, I talked with a transgender woman. She's a little bit skeptical about this.
Attorney General Jeff Sessions is entering uncharted territory for his DOJ, protecting the rights of a gender-bending teen. The New York Times reports Sessions personally dispatched the prosecutor to Burlington, Iowa, to engage in the investigation of Kadari Johnson's murder.
We will continue to protect the civil rights of all Americans, and we will not tolerate the targeting of any community in our country.
Mara Kiesling of the National Center for Transgender Equality isn't giving the department much credit. She says this is simply an example of the DOJ following existing law.
It is their job. It's kind of ironic when everybody gets excited that Jeff Sessions is actually doing his job and enforcing federal laws for once. And we are glad he is in this instance. However, hate crimes against trans people are way up this year.
Kiesling points to the climate she believes President Trump and AG Sessions have created as partly to blame for the spike.
I do not want to let this administration or Attorney General Sessions off the hook.
Trump, who promised to be a friend to the LGBTQ community, has rolled back Title IX protections and attempted to ban transgender people from the military. While in the Senate, Sessions was against marriage equality and equal protections expansions. In his first few months at the DOJ, he reversed workplace discrimination standards and rolled back bathroom protections for trans children.
You are telling trans children and trans adults and the public that trans people are not worth protecting.
Instead of pushing sweeping policies, the Sessions DOJ is focused on prosecuting individual hate crimes like this one.
I'm glad that he thinks transgender people shouldn't be murdered, but if you're going to take away trans people's livelihoods, if you don't think they deserve protection from job discrimination, and you don't think they deserve protection, our children, from educational discrimination, it's hard to imagine that they really care about trans people.
So I found this last point really interesting because we've seen Sessions and the DOJ investigating these hate crimes, but no broad sweeping policies like past administrations. So I talked to a political science professor, Melissa Michelson, about this and whether this could be an effective policy. The Sessions DOJ, how is that operating differently than the Obama DOJ or even the Bush DOJ?
Well, when it comes specifically to LGBT rights, what we're seeing with this Department of Justice is really a pulling back on the protections for individual rights, for their rights not to be discriminated against, and more of a focus on punishing criminals, and in particular on punishing hate crimes.
Why does the Sessions DOJ not necessarily want to put forth these broad sweeping policies?
It's not just that they're not promoting pro-LGBT policies, they're reversing Obama-era pro-LGBT policies. This Department of Justice, this Attorney General doesn't believe in those rights, right? They believe that violence is bad. Sessions believes that violence is bad and that violent criminals should be punished. And I think what we're seeing here is a willingness to punish violence regardless of who the victim is, right? So his belief that LGBT people don't deserve workplace protections, don't deserve protections against discrimination by bakers or school districts, doesn't extend to saying that they shouldn't be attacked or that they shouldn't be killed. He still wants to punish people who perpetuate those violent attacks.
Is that why we're seeing, hate crimes being prosecuted not just in the LGBTQ community, but we're seeing
things to do with Muslims. We're seeing things to do with white nationalists. He's showing that he's interested in prosecuting these kinds of crimes, but not in these broad sweeping protections.
Right. He's interested in punishing violent criminals. So no matter who the victim is of the attacks, we're seeing a pretty consistent determination to punish violent criminals.
How does this play into the political sphere?
I guess I can see how that might be perceived as inconsistent, right? Is he for the LGBT community or not? But I think really it is very consistent. I don't think the Sessions Department of Justice deciding to step in this case is evidence that he supports transgender people at all. I think that's a misreading of what's going on here. I think this is just more of him wanting to punish criminals.
I think that's a good point right there, that she says, you know, maybe this isn't about trans people per se, it's about him enforcing the law. And it is worth making the point that many conservatives, even some Democrats, say, you know, you don't need to write each and every group into hate crime laws or protections laws because people are already covered, and then you can enforce them in cases like this.
Well, they feel like if you have these individual protections, you're just kind of going above and beyond what really needs to be done. Exactly.
Yeah. So let's talk about this. Obviously, transgender Americans are minorities. There's been some concern in the people you talk to about the tough on crime idea at the DOJ, possibly targeting other minorities.
Right. I mean, it's not necessarily that it targets them specifically. It's that she told me to think about it more like not pro-trans so much as anti-violent criminal. And we know that disproportionately black men and Latino men are targeted when you have these crime crackdowns. So she worries that if you're doing these broad sweeping crime crackdowns, that's who's really going to be disproportionately affected. And she says get rid of these stop pulling these anti-discrimination policies, and then maybe crime against transgender people will stop as well.
Alex, thanks. Lots to think about there.